to give it just a couple more minutes, and then whenever you're ready, just go ahead.
There's like, because usually you have like a master's or there's more like, out there. Yeah, cool. Because everybody I guess we'll get started since I don't want anybody to get stranded here and have to spend the night at the university. Good afternoon. I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking around for this talk. At the end of the day, I know that for a lot of us it was like, should we go? It's like a 2-hour lunch here, but I do appreciate you coming, taking the time. My name is Ben Bukowski, and I'm VP of Interactive and Technology at a digital agency in downtown Cleveland called Waltz Digital. We're in Terminal Tower. You may recognize this building from The Avengers. Of course, it was all in Germany at the time when they shot it. They didn't move the building, it was all special effects. But yeah, nevertheless, we work right downtown where we try to craft great user experiences for folks on the web, in apps, to support marketing activities and public relations, really any kind of integrated marketing. It's a great place to come and hang out, and it's nice and centrally located, so it's also got a great view of the lake. So I'm going to start off to kind of frame the idea behind this talk. You know, I've been doing this for a while now, and a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is stuff that I've experienced firsthand, and I'm sure that a lot of you have too. So I'd love to hear some of your stories, and hopefully I'll have some time for discussion at the end. But to start this off, I wanted to use this as a way to kind of frame this whole idea behind conventional wisdom. So I'm going to turn it over to the Stevens from Freakonomics.
I think of conventional wisdom as all the stuff that your mom told you that you believed wholeheartedly because you thought your mom had all the answers, and then you grew up and you kind of realized maybe your mom didn't have all the answers, but you still believe all the stuff she told you because you don't have anything better to go with. And so a lot of what we do is about taking the things our moms told us, and instead of saying, yeah, my mom must have been right about that, instead saying, well, wait a second, is there any way we can go in the data and figure out whether that's really true? And what we do over and over and over is we go, we find data, and it turns out that what moms all over the world have been telling us, well, they were just making that up or learning that from their moms, and they never had any evidence in the first place.
Yeah, or they're conditioned like, you know, any human beings, but like fear, wanting to protect your kids, like, you know, car seats. Like, you know, what good mom or dad doesn't want to, you know, protect your kid as well as you can in the car? So we buy these expensive car seats, and we spend all this time trying to get them attached right. We go to the police station to get the police to do them, and then it turns out the data shows that, like, even if they're put in right, it seems like they don't do very well. They
Well,
don't
I mean,
provide
they
much.
hurt you.
They don't hurt you, but they don't.
As much as people.
For mortality and serious accidents compared to seat belts for little kids, even though they don't really fit the kids that well at all, they're not made for kids. The car seats are not this magic bullet, but people want to believe in that because it seems sensible. So like when we do things like that, some people get upset with us because they say we're trying to kill children, right? We're trying to tell people to go around driving with their kids hanging out the window. We're very much not that. We have a bunch of kids and we try not to kill them every day. And but the point is if you believe in these things that everybody thinks are good, and then they turn out not to be good, I think it's our job to tell people that they're not so good. And if you're really worried about child safety in cars or global warming or bacterial infections in hospital, the first thing to do is put down the conventional wisdom and figure out where the actual problem is, and then figure out how to solve it.
Thank you, Stevens. I think that also applies to a lot of usability, user experience, and information architecture problems as well. And so what I'm going to go over with today, before I get into this real quick, I just wanted to say I've got a couple of Amazon gift cards up here, $25 a piece. I was going to give out a copy of Don't Make Me Think and Mythbusters, the latest edition, but it didn't come from Amazon in time. So I brought these gift cards because the next best thing, and you don't have to buy that stuff if you don't want to. You can get whatever else you want. So I will randomly pick somebody that tweets at me during this talk. I have the stuff down here, but it's just @ Series Beats on the front of the computer here. So I'll pick a couple from random, so feel free to tweet and add your 2 cents. So the ones we're going to cover today, there's 5 of them. There's 3 Clicks of Destiny, also known as 3 Clicks from the Home Page. The Adventures Beyond the Page Fold, that's one of my favorite ones, favorite classics. And The Faceted Navigation of Doom, also known as the misuse of hierarchical organization and or the abuse of it. And then the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Homepage is a new one that I worked on the last time I reworked this talk, and so spent some time in that, and I'm excited to share some of that stuff with you. And then we'll wrap up with Lost in White Space, and which I think you'll find interesting as well. So get started with the 3 Clicks of Destiny. So I want to talk about this one because I feel like this is pretty pervasive. It's something that it isn't as much of an issue nowadays, except that when you deal with people that really have no background or relevant experience with this kind of thing, is that it just sort of seems to hang around. So I'm going to start off with just some background on this. It's as old as the internet because people have been saying things like this for years. I mean, since my first days of pre-doing UX, just doing development and building websites. C-level CTOs, these people would say, everything has to be 3 clicks from the homepage. And the reason they would say this is because they felt like, it made a lot of sense. It had this, it rang true to them, and they say it with conviction and everything. But, they tossed it around as if it were sort of just common knowledge that common sense that everybody should have, right? And the thing of it was that it does seem to have a simple logic to it. Why shouldn't everything be at least 3 clicks from the homepage? Everything should. So let's start with that. So this is the premise for this myth, and now what I want to do is take a look at some data. So I did research on this, and this first thing up here was a study done by UIE, Jared Spool's group, where they actually got really interested in this whole concept of the 3-click rule and wanted to know if there was anything to it. So they took 44 users and had them run through a bunch of tasks, and they tracked all the clicks that they had during these tasks that they did. And you can see here on the graph that there were as many clicks for people that were making their tasks and completing things as there were for people that were failing or getting frustrated. And this was interesting to them because they expected to see this big drop-off. People don't find their way, and I'm giving up, I'm done. But they saw nothing like that. In fact, even when they purposely made it impossible for them to complete the test, people kept clicking. They'd click back, they'd try to click something else. They just kept going. So there was that failure that still happened. So they're like, man, what's really going on here? To me, that was one thing that said, well, if this is really happening, then why is it not showing up in these tests? Because clearly we would see evidence of this if this was going to happen. I'm a bit of a Buckeyes fan. I'm sure a lot of you are too. And I was really excited that they beat Alabama, probably more so than even winning the national championship. It was just nice to get that SEC win under our belts. And but it got me thinking, what would be a good, just sort of ethnographic study on this same concept. So I started thinking, I wonder how many touchdowns J.T. Barrett had during the regular season. There we go. So I went on to ESPN and I clicked on NCAA football. I thought, okay, we're getting there. I got my second click there and getting close, but here I got to get down to the Big Ten here, find Ohio State. Click through there. Now I've already spent my 3 clicks. So what am I going to do next? Geez, I don't know. I guess I got to go over here to statistics, and look under here. Let's see. We've got there's his name. I can click there, and there's a good click, and as I scroll down, I'm finally able to get to one last click to get to the stats, and by my 6th click, which is twice as many as the advocated amount, I'm finally able to see that it was 34, which is pretty impressive for a guy that didn't even finish out the season. So, I mean, based on that, I mean, what would you guys say? Do you think that this, this myth, is this true, or are we going to label this one busted? Busted?
Busted.
Busted, okay. Yeah, so it is. This is busted. I mean, there's no way that you could ever advocate that everything should be 3 clicks. But, and this is the thing, out of every myth, there's a kernel of truth to that, and that's where legends are born, is from this kernel of truth. So what I want to do is talk about, like, what are we really seeing here? What's the underlying thing that we should be learning from? And so going back to the study, what was happening is that people were frustrated. And so when people are frustrated, what they want to do is they want to express that frustration. And one of the very easy ways to say is that I had to click too much. I'm clicking all over the place and I'm not getting anywhere. And so that's where I think some of this kind of starts to coalesce and turn into this myth. And so when you hear somebody say that, when a C-level or executive comes up to you and says, well, everything needs to be 3 clicks. I don't like this is not 3 clicks. Tell them that, what, you're absolutely right. And tell them I'm going to do you 2 better, and I'm going to say it's really the 1-click rule. And what I mean by the 1-click rule is that this is all about information sent. It does not really matter how many clicks something is from any page. What matters is that people should feel like if they're trying to accomplish something, that they should feel like they're making progress. And so every step that they take, every click that they make, they should feel like they're moving forward. And that's really what we need to take away from this. And that's how you can reframe this and take it back to them and help them understand. Show them that this is why something's 3 clicks, because we're providing contextual information, or we're giving them alternate paths, or not everybody thinks the way you do, and things like that. So the next one I want to talk about is the page fold, the adventures beyond the page fold. So this one is pretty near and dear to my heart because this is one of the more common ones that I come across a lot. And it was so bad at one point that it inspired me to write a blog post about it. And I went through all kinds of scenarios and ideas behind it. But at the same time, I really did want to kind of go back and kind of say, I want to take like an unbiased look at this and say, like, what's really happening here? Is there any truth to this? So, just to fill in the details for all of us, is that the page fold is this idea that came out from newspapers, right? So newspapers have a natural fold to them, and they're in these like vending type machines, so you can't get to it without seeing. And the thing that gets you to open that up and pay your money is to grab that headline, the thing that you see there. And so that's where that kind of came in, and it's used a ton because you show somebody a design and they're like, oh my gosh, this is below the fold. It's totally wrong, and you've screwed up, and so it becomes it's really hard for them to accept that everything isn't above the fold. Even if they, in their own experience, that's not really what they experience when they're surfing the web themselves. And I want to say that a little bit of this is on us, okay? So, I mean, how many of you get to the design phase and you mount that on a nice board and you take it in and you parade it around for the design by committee team? Have you ever done that? A few of us? Okay, well, we used to do that a lot. And I think that by doing that, it's pretty bad because it sets the wrong tone for something. You're taking a digital artifact and you're putting it into this analog space and expecting them to accept it and say, well, gosh, it's okay that this stuff is like way down here at the bottom. So, going on from that, I did look at some stuff on this. Again, did some, CX Partners actually did a big study on user sessions to see whether or not people would actually, what they did when they had to scroll. Was this like going to be an issue for people? And they looked at 800 user sessions, but there were only 3 where there was an issue with the page fold. I'm going to talk about that in just one second, but I want to get through these others real quick. On a more quantitative level, the Clicktail looked at, this was an analytics analysis where they looked at 120,000 page views. What they found is just by looking at the analytics, they could tell that all these pages that were among the 120,000, 9 out of 10 of them had a scroll bar, which meant that you had to scroll on this page. 9 out of 10, so that's a lot of pages from all these different websites. And that when they looked at whether or not people scrolled on the page, 3 out of 4 of them scrolled at least a little bit on all of these pages that had scroll bars. And almost 1 in 4 scrolled all the way to the bottom. So what's really going on here? You know, up at the top, the CX partners, where there was an issue with the poll, where they gave them a task and they had to scroll to get to completion on it. The only time where they ever saw an issue, those 3, they went back and looked at what's going on with these outliers, and what they found when they looked closely at what those designs were, is that it created this false footer. The way that the design was, it looked like that was the end of the page, and so they didn't think they needed to scroll. And it wasn't that actually that they wouldn't. The final thing I want to say is, if you look at this graphic here, this is an excerpt from a blog post by Patty Donnelly. It's kind of old now. It's been out for probably about 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. But the first time I saw this, I thought, what a great metaphor. This iceberg, where your content, starts at the top of the page, but then as you go down the page reading this post, he's going, there are people that have you believe that you're not really doing this right now. And so it was just sort of a real kind of tongue-in-cheek way of showing that this is just completely ridiculous that you would consider not having somebody scroll on your site. And then he goes to point out, some really great examples like 37 Signals and how their page starts off with this nice kind of overview of the things that they have service-wise, but then it goes through and says, and here's like some testimonials and people that are using them, and here's what some of the features are, and here's how you sign up. And oh, by the way, let's reiterate what we just told you up at the top. So it's this nice kind of pleasant user experience that they go through, as by means of counterpointing this whole argument. So I really like that. I highly recommend checking him out if you get a chance online. So there was that. That's kind of like the research piece. And then I did some of my own ethnographic research. I went out and grabbed screenshots of these popular websites, and you can clearly see that in all of these websites that I've put up here, that more than 70% of the content is below the fold. Okay, what's going on? I mean, these guys are like huge. If people are having a problem with this, then why are they doing it? I mean, that would kind of be counterintuitive to them. But at the same time, when they went through and looked at the when I looked at this, I just measured the pixels. So I mean, I'm telling you, this is true. So what's really happening? I mean, does this hold water at all? I would say no. Based on the research we did, based on just my own ethnographic research, it really is not that big of a deal. But again, going back to what are we to learn from this? I mean, this is where we have to say, okay, take time and just think about it like this. Okay, you need to tell a story with your content. One of the ways that I've found things to be most effective is start with your content first. I mean, I'll talk about mobile first here. Mobile first, this idea that you should really start at the mobile level. The reason why is because the constraints are so great that you don't have the luxury of just sort of filling up this big 1080p screen with a bunch of content. It forces you to think about things in terms of a hierarchy. And I would advocate on top of that telling a story. So if you have a narrative structure that says, hey, here's an introduction and here's what happens next, and you want to know more, and so you keep going, that's a great way to draw people down that page and kind of get them to convert or turn into a lead or whatever that might be. So you can start with that and kind of use that as a way to kind of advocate for this. But then at the same time, I mean, go right to it and say, look to the leaders. I mean, what are these popular websites like the BBC, which is a global website, or Amazon, which is arguably the largest retailer, online retailer in the world, doing, having pages as long as they do. So I think those are good examples where you can kind of contradict any kind of argument you might have. And then but the final thing I do want to say is that if we're going to take anything away from this, is to kind of look at, okay, how many of you have been on Pinterest before? Okay, so yeah, it just keeps loading stuff and loading stuff. Anybody get sucked in by that for a while? And you're kind of like, where'd my day go? Oh my gosh. Right, okay, so that's something that, depending on what your objectives are, you might want to avoid that. So if you've got a list of search results and you just keep loading and loading, it might be good to give them a pause, a break, because it can be kind of like an unwinnable game that you just keep scrolling and get to the end, which you see on websites like Google's image search or Bing's image search. They used to do that, and then they stopped, where you scroll for a while and then it stops and says you want to load more, to kind of get people to continue on. Also, don't take your, oh, we'll just keep everything, above the fold here, we'll just squash this up and make the inside part scroll. That's also kind of a big fail, so don't do that. Avoid that if you can. The next one I want to talk about is the faceted navigation of doom. The best I can come up with to describe this. So with this, I want to talk about something. I'm going to tell a little story of something that I recently came across. So there's this podcast that I've been listening to called Invisibilia, and it's super fascinating. But they had one of their episodes where they talked about the power of categories, and it was excellent. I really liked the subject matter. But the first thing that they did is they talked about this coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan called Rise. And what Rise had done is they put a question to all of the patrons that were coming in. Are you ready for this? The question was, which do you like better, kittens or puppies? Now this, harrowing question, they put up, and they put 2 tip jars out. And so everybody going up to pay could put their change in one or the other. And it was pretty compelling what they saw. Their tips soared after they did this, because everybody was like, oh, I want to self-select. I'm definitely a dog person, or I'm definitely a cat person. And I thought, wow, what a powerful thing that is like occurring in the real world. It has nothing to do with digital user experience or anything like that. But what it was, to me, it was showing that the power of categories is there, because once you understand a category or the idea behind a category, it allows you to navigate the world in a very good way, because you can sit there and say, well, based on the fact that I know what a cup is and how it works, any cup that you come at me, whether it's plastic or glass, I know how to use it, I know what I can expect from it. So things like that can be really powerful, and so I'm not arguing against hierarchy or categories, but what I am saying is that this can be overused. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they're like, well, if you want to give everybody every option, going back to the 3-click rule, you have to have a navigation with like 12 things in it, and like what are people going to do? They don't even know where to click. So there's that. The other thing is that I think that based on what I was just telling you in that story, is that people have a very strong feeling about their preference for something. And so when you're talking to stakeholders, they'll say, well, I think it should go here, because this is where it makes sense. This is the product group that covers this paint or product or service or whatever it is. And at the same time, people need to know that that's where it's at. And we'll just, we'll put a big label, we'll make the label really big so they can really see it. But I'm like, but not everybody thinks like that, okay? So you've got to step outside of your own preference for something and consider that other people might be in different modes, that they might be looking for things in a different way. Again, there's also this idea with duplicate content, and you get SEO people will come to you and say, well, you can't have this in 2 places because it's going to screw up our search results, or search rankings. But I don't think that holds a lot of water. Besides, you can use the canonical tag if you don't know about it to get around that. And then, again, just that visceral place for everything in its place. This is how we think as humans. So it's not irrational, or I should say, it's not unexpected that you would encounter this. But when it comes to trying to describe to somebody this idea of, okay, we're going to have this faceted nav, and so this is an actual site map that I was doing for a client, where they had all these products, and so I had to say, okay, well, you've got featured products, okay, well, that's there, and that gets you to some stuff because they really want to push those. But then when they had like over 800 products, so how are you going to find something? Well, we went through and he said, well, you could select in color, finish, whether it was made for indoor or outdoor, what surface, and below that were all these subcategories. And so I was explaining, so if somebody comes in and they have a very particular application that they're looking for, they can select and see what kind of colors of blue do you have that I can put on my outdoor chair because I know it's outdoor. Well, that gets you right to a very narrow amount of products. Well, they were like, but yeah, but how can they go down this route and then go down that route, and then they just kind of got quiet, and it was like, trying to explain this, it was, there is like, I don't understand. I don't understand. So I mean, I can understand that this is tough for some people to, kind of, how can things exist in more than one place, So I will say I have sympathy for those of us, those of you that have to go out and kind of deal with this. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I had the videotape him because he just finished eating. All right, so Endeca is this really great search technology. What it does is it basically creates a very fast index of all your content and allows you to create multiple categories upon which you can apply this, and it spreads out all of your content. I understand, it makes it a lot bigger. I read through some of their case studies, and to me this was like really compelling evidence. If you need a reason to tell somebody that they should really be considering faceted navigation for their growing product or service catalog, but there's lots of different ways to think about it, tell them about the kittycare.com example where they were able to increase conversion by 100%. I mean, who doesn't want to sell more products or services? Anybody's going to kind of jump on that. So that's a pretty compelling argument there. Both, in Autoscout here, 70% decrease in search results not found. I mean, if you go to a website and you do a search and nothing comes up, I'm out. I'm not even going to go another. I'm like, what am I even here for? You guys don't have this. I mean, that's a pretty big pitfall. And then, the auto group, being able to take that down to nothing. I mean, if you can look at what people are searching for and just you can capture like no search results found just to see what it is they're looking for, I mean, that's a huge area for improvement on your site that you can have an immediate impact. And by using a technology like Endeca, they were able to have an impact on how that works. So there was that. Again, I also did some ethnographic research. Went out, looking at like sports websites, they have a lot of categories for the different kinds of sports, especially obviously ESPN, but MSN and USA Today. I mean, you can see up there all of these different categories they've had. But inside there were all these subcategories. So teams belong to conferences, but they were also, of a certain league. And there were winners and losers, and were they in this division or that division? So there's so many ways to slice and dice this. So again, this is just naturally occurring where there's this fragmentation of, even when I was trying to find Ohio State, and like, how do I get, there were multiple paths that I could have taken to get there. So that's already happening. And then you've got consumer websites like Home Depot, Target, Best Buy, they use Endeca today. So again, if somebody's like, I don't get it, well, have you been on Best Buy's website recently, or did you go to Home Depot and you're trying to find, a light or, a certain kind of paneling or paint? I mean, you're using this filtered navigation to drill down and find something, and they're like, oh, that's what that is. Yes, that's what that is. That can help them understand. So that's a good way to kind of look at it. It's also a way to kind of show them that this is actually happening. And the final thing is this with the image search. I mean, by using image search, and I'm sure a lot of you use it, but it's like sometimes I'm looking for, a lot of times I'm looking for, just line drawings. I don't want to use a full fidelity thing in my wireframe. I want to keep it low fidelity. But I'm looking for a certain size or shape, so there's lots of different ways in which I might want to categorize my search beyond just a keyword. So that, again, happening in the real world. So, again, I'd advocate that this is a busted thing. There is no, one place for everything. You're not just going to have everything sort of live in its own silo. Really, what do we learn from all this? Peter Morville wrote a great book called Search Patterns, which you can use the Amazon gift card if you win it to buy, because it's a great book even now. He talks about, think about this. Somebody comes to your site and they know exactly what they're looking for. They're going to be searching for it. They're going to be, maybe they'll use your navigation, but they know exactly what they're looking for. Other people might be coming to your site, they might have an idea about what you're looking for. Maybe they know a top-level category, but they don't know what are all the options. And then you got people that are coming to your site that really don't know they don't have something they're particularly looking for. They're just trying to see what it is that you have, and they're just wanting to explore. Those are 3 different modes. And then that's all for first-time visitors. Think about people that are coming back to your site after they've been there before, and they want to refine something that they already found. Maybe now they're ready to buy. So that's, again, a 4th mode of being in search, that somebody's going to come to your site, and you need a different way of handling that. And it's not always going to be one single hierarchy of content. So, when you deal with that preference and mood, think about that in terms of, like, people go to websites sometimes, one of the things we see a lot is that people will go to a site and they'll just use the search box right away. They just skip right over your navigation. They don't care that you put, hours and hours of time into thinking about those top-level categories. They, maybe they have a specific thing that they're looking for, an obscure term or something. They just want to see if you have it. So your search better work pretty good. And by the way, search is navigation. And then the final thing I would say is, again, I'm not arguing against hierarchy or categorization, especially not categorization, but you need to think about how we can balance the breadth and depth. If something's too deep, it probably needs more horizontal categories and vice versa. So that was the big takeaway that I had after doing all the research on this. The next thing is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Homepage. This one, like I said, this was a newer one. It came up to me, where I was dealing with this, like, people are saying, okay, well, we need to do this design, and they just want to start with the homepage. And I thought, okay, well, that's great. Let's get the homepage design going. But they don't have any content. They don't know what their website's going to. You're going to have projects, products, featured products. You're going to have videos. They don't know. But they're like, just get to it. They look at their homepage as being this like megaphone. Like everybody's gonna come and they're gonna come right through the homepage. They're not going anywhere else. And this is their like where they can hold them captive and beat them over the head with what they want to tell them. You know, they also look into this like, we'll just put placeholder copy here and we'll put some placeholder images. And you know, we don't have a value prop yet, but just put a headline up there. You know, and then I come back and it's like the value prop's like 3 paragraphs long. I'm like, okay, well, that's really not going to work in this design. And that's the thing. The homepage is the design. That is, we're done. We got the homepage. We can go home now. It to me was just ridiculous. Coming across this. Now looking at this, looking at homepage traffic patterns. People used to go to the homepage a lot, and so I think that's where some of this kind of got started. That everybody kind of cares so much about the homepage. But here's the thing: is that people went to the homepage because website search before Google used to suck. I don't know if you ever used Lycos before, but you would search for you hit or miss if you're going to really find something. So people would go to websites and they would use the local search on the site because it was a lot more reliable and scoped to what they were looking for than a general search on the internet was. And then think about, have any of you been on Reddit or BuzzFeed or Pinterest in the last month? Anybody? Yeah? How many of you have been on the homepage of any of these websites? Nope. Exactly. You're going to this from posting in Facebook or in Twitter, somebody emails you something or texts you something. I mean, that's how you're getting to a lot of this content, right? So it's not about the homepage, and then here's another thing, bounce rate. I have looked at I have access to analytics of tons of clients of ours, and I look at a lot of it. And do you want to guess what the page that has the highest bounce rate is? The homepage. Now, there's lots of reasons why people might bounce on the homepage. They might just need your phone number and they're gone. But if they're coming to your homepage and they're not finding anything that they think that they're going to find, then that's a big problem. And I think that's where, we're skip the content, we're just going to go right for some big brand play or something. Now, this is a great example of exactly what I mean. And this is funny because it's true, right? So I go to, on the left are the things at the front page of a university website, and on the right are the things that I'm looking for when I come to a site. And the only thing they have in common is the name of the school. I mean, tell me that that's not true. Probably not at Kent, but they're the outlier, right? So, going on, I mean, looking at some examples here. I just picked Square because I really like the design of their site. They do a really good job with starting off with their value proposition. They're telling a story. They're making it easy to see. There's good visual hierarchy, good contrast. The interesting, use of photography and imagery with the sort of masonry layout. I like it because it gives me a place to go. It's interesting, and I want to know more. And you contrast that with healthcare.gov. Now, you can say what you want about the design. I don't think the design is necessarily terrible, but what I can say is it didn't work very well. So, I mean, something that, and this is the thing that kind of rings true a lot, is that you can spend all day long making something super usable, like the usability of this thing is through the roof, but if it's not useful, it's kind of pointless. And if it doesn't work, that's even worse. And then the final thing is the ugly. So if you are feeling bad about your own website, you can always go here and kind of feel a little bit better about yourself. It's a good boost. So again, the thing of it is, it's like a lot of times you got to remember what the homepage is. It's there as something to it's there as sort of a container for the rest of your site. It's there to greet you and say, here's where I think you should go next, right? So looking at, I was talking about the visual hierarchy, or using different kinds of imagery to draw people in. I mean, you're all looking at this animated GIF of this guy doing this crazy jump, and I don't know what that person on the end is thinking that they chose to lay there, but I mean, your eye immediately goes to that. There's motion to it. You've got this kind of captivated look, on what they're doing. Now, the thing of it is, if you look past this, okay, so we've got this over here. You read this, now this, that's visual hierarchy. You got something big, a little bit smaller, it draws you down the page. You have just experienced what I'm talking about. So your homepage should really be about this. It should be a brand statement. I mean, that's really all it is at the end of the day. I mean, yeah, it's got some content, and maybe it's got some ways to get in contact with your company, or phone number, email, stuff like that, or see the latest news. But that's not really necessarily why people are coming. A lot of times they're just coming to get to the content. They're getting past the homepage. So that's why it's important to have really clear navigation. Now that navigation could be, in the page. When I say navigation, I don't mean the bar across the top necessarily. It could be, hey, let's get started, log in here, whatever that might be, but it should just be clear because you want people to spend as little amount of time on the homepage as possible. I mean, unless you are having some kind of a single page app or you have a very small kind of subset of it, it's just like, this is pretty much all we do, so we don't need a whole lot of depth. But at the end of the day, especially if you have a larger website, you want to get people through. So you want to say, hey, what's new, what's next? Your website, homepage should be bubbling up all of that stuff and kind of be working for you a little bit better. I would say that if you can get people to spend a smaller amount of time on your homepage without leaving your site, I mean, that would be a good benchmark that I would say, measure that and see if you can get that to go down and get that engagement up. And that I would say is probably a huge win. All right, the final one here, lost white space. So this is, this one's a little bit more in maybe kind of the graphic design realm, but I think it kind of starts off in that, in the user experience planning piece where you're still doing the layout. Because, I know that I think about this a lot, and when it comes to things like making navigation clear, I think this really kind of stands out. So, how many of you have had a client of yours or your boss or somebody say, can you make the logo bigger? Kind of small. Okay, we've heard this one? Okay, good. Not the only one. A lot of times you have all this white space on this page, and they'll look at it and like, oh yeah, it's really great, it's really nice, but can we put an advertisement for our new product here underneath the main nav? Or let's put the email sign up over here in the sidebar where we've got all this space here, and because it is kind of a cousin of the page fold in that it seems to be like, well, there's all this room that we're not using, and we can just push everything up and it'll be on the fold and it'll be great. So, I did some research into this, and this was a little bit more academic, very specifically, in that Wichita State did a study where they took these college students and had them read passages from the ACT and the SAT. And what they did is they took out all the white space, and they had them read these passages, and then they tested them on it. Okay, and what they found is that when they introduced margins, on the sides and the tops, and they put in, line height and spacing and everything, and they put in headings, that this resulted in a 12.5% increase in comprehension, which is pretty good, right? That's great. But what they also found was that there was a decrease of about 25 words per minute. So that's bad. Is that bad? I'd say probably not. Because what's happening, or what they saw what was happening was, without white space and without this kind of way of having your eye being able to follow a visual hierarchy, people were just skimming through. So they weren't really reading with a lot of concentration and focus. So they had a hard time doing that. And so that's why their comprehension went down. So just because they're slowing down, maybe you want them to slow down because you want them to absorb that a little bit more. That was something that I took from this. And then, consider white space in real life. Google's homepage been pretty much the same. I mean, yeah, they've added a few features and things, but it's still the logo and maybe a doodle, but then it's the search box and that's it. Just to harken back to something I said before, the footer thing, years ago, when the web was slower for all of us, really, before broadband was really big, Google was seeing that a lot of people were coming to the homepage and staying there for a long time and doing nothing, and then either leaving or then finally searching, and they're like, what? Because their site was still pretty fast compared to most websites, especially because it had almost nothing on it. And so they did some usability testing, and they found out that people were landing on the page and waiting for it to finish loading. So what they did is they put a little deferred JavaScript would fade in a fake kind of like footer, at the bottom, and then they'd go, oh, it's loaded now, I can search. Or consider going to the Apple Store. Now, I mean, if you go to the Apple Store, think about it. You have these products that are sitting in these nice big tables, these nice aisleways. It's great. I mean, unless the iPhone 6 is just launched and then it's like chaos in there. But in general, what you're seeing is this, this is not just taking place on the web, but it's taking place outside of the web in places, where we are, shopping and visiting every day. So again, I think that, with this final one, even this one, it's pretty busted. I mean, and it's hard to say it's busted. I'm just saying that, taking away white space, and saying that it doesn't serve a purpose. But I got some really compelling arguments around why it's really good. Now, the first thing is obviously what we saw from the study at Wichita State is that it does increase readability. They've shown this in lots of other studies too, not just that one. White space gives your eye a place to go. It doesn't clutter it up. There's this really great post by Chris Pearson on Personified where he goes through and talks about typography and how there should be this relationship between line height and point size for the font size and column width. And that if it follows the golden ratio, that if your line height is so big and your column is so wide, that it's much easier to read because the saccades of your eyes you're moving across work a lot better. And if things are too crunched together, you're not going to kind of work that well. So it's a good baseline. I highly encourage go checking that out. He's got a calculator on there so you can figure it out with whatever your baseline for your font is, and you can use that. So increasing readability is great because a person that's understanding what you're offering or what you're trying to do or who you are, they're going to get a lot more out of it if you're doing it right. The other thing I was going to say is be consistent. Don't do a design that says, hey, we're going to do this great homepage design, and then we're done, and it's got all this nice use of white space, and then inside your site, everything's crammed together with navigation all over the place, and we're putting ad units in. Just don't try not to do that, because if the consistency is lost, even if they have a great experience at first, that's going to quickly drop off. And then the final thing I want to say is about this is that if you think about luxury brands, think about a high-end perfume, Chanel or, Tiffany or Mercedes, all of these brands. Think about the ads in your mind, and maybe you can just imagine this, but a lot of times it's like you've got this car that's driving across this like open plain, or this perfume that's sitting in the middle of this page and there's nothing around it. There's all this negative space. Well, what it's doing is it's connotating to you that this is a really valuable thing. And so when you take this to your client, you could say, you are really important. And that's why we're putting all this white space here, because we want to convey that to the end user that this is something that you should pay attention to. And I think that they'll kind of latch onto that. I mean, the final thing is that good design is invisible. One last anecdote about Jared Spool that I thought was great is they did this redesign of Netflix, and it was back when they got the recommendation engine and all that kind of stuff up and running. They put a lot of time and effort into it. And when it launched, it was really super successful. But when they went back and polled everybody, the thing is, it's not that people were saying, wow, you picked the greatest color palette, and I love this font. They didn't say that at all. They just liked the experience. They talked about how it was great. They had this recommendation engine. It's easy to get around on. It was snappy. It made sense. And that's because the design was so good that it was in the background. They weren't thinking about that. If the design is bad, that's where it kind of sticks out, and you're like, I don't know, this font's really kind of messing with my head, or there's too much color on this page. That's when the design kind of gets in the way. So you really want it to be invisible. And that is all I have for today. Anybody have any questions or comments? Any stories you'd like to share about any of this stuff?
Do you think some of those, myths maybe started because technology has changed? So, for example, the above the page fold, because now we have scroll wheels, and before you had to do that, click and hold, move your whole mouse, and we had 56K as opposed to high-speed internet. So, do you think any of those myths came because of technology and it's changed because of that? And if so, what will be next when technology goes somewhere completely different?
That is a great question, and I won't take too much time with this, but yes, I think that as I said at the beginning, I think that from every legend that is born, there's a kernel of truth to it. That's where I think a lot of this comes from, and that's why at the end of each one I wanted to say, what is the takeaway here? What are we really learning? I absolutely believe that it's the change in technology, and it's the change of the capabilities of our browsers and our devices that are driving a lot of this. Scrolling is not something that's as big of a deal nowadays. And that's the thing that I also kind of point out, is that people will kind of disregard their own experience when they're looking at a static mock-up, because they're like, they don't really think, well, you're going to be able to scroll on this. And the other thing is, I have a whole other talk on the mobile first stuff where I'm saying, like, okay, so we learned, initially the internet was really slow, and we were designing for constraints. And then broadband came out, and then everybody got all super happy, and they're doing Flash, and they got all these like giant graphics and all this other stuff. And page size has and continues to balloon. I mean, I think on average across the internet, it's something like 1.2 meg per page. On average, That's a lot, okay? And so what's happening is now you've got these devices that were coming on, and I'm looking at stuff, and it's, okay, maybe I'm not on a Wi-Fi connection, maybe I'm on 3G, you know, or if I'm using like a device like this, I've got a constraint on, it's a round screen that's using Bluetooth to transmit that, that's like dial-up. So if you're not designing for constraints, then I think, you know, it's like the Titanic, you know, it's like you're not learning, those who fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it, right? So to me, that's like, yes, it's coming from that, and so let's learn these lessons so that as they come back around, as technology continues to change, then, you know, how are we continuing to, you know, applying the things that we've already learned instead of having to relearn those same kinds of lessons?
I liked your argument about how it's not all about the homepage, and I think in our particular agency, they tend to focus a lot on that design. And I'm curious what you feel about the, you know, the trend of the one-page website and the long scrolling website, and that's the homepage technically,
Mm-hmm.
and how that, you know, I guess it's more of a comment, but also like just what's your opinion on that?
Well, you know, I actually kind of like it when it's applied in the right way. I mean, it depends on what website you're talking about. I mean, Mashable, it's got lots of posts on it, and where the post isn't even long itself. But I wouldn't say that, you know, that you would want to have one-page website for it. I mean, it's kind of a lot of one-page websites in one website. The other thing that you notice a lot, if you think about it, is that we've kind of gone away from the fixed width because of responsive. And what we're doing is we're getting this full width that like responds, so you have to think more about your content. So I talk about the mobile first stuff, it's really content first, or maybe even API first, thinking about what you can do, and saying like, well, how are we gonna adapt to this? So don't go, well, you know, we have to design, you know, one mock for the iPad and one for the iPhone and then one for the desktop, because there's so many devices and you don't know which orientation you're talking about, and you don't even know what the shape of the screen is. On a one-page website though, when you're doing that, you get this nice clear break in order to do that effectively, like that thing about, oh, the false footer. If you're doing a good way of drawing somebody down the page or telling a narrative, that's great. And if all you have to do is tell your story with just that content on the page, and you can be concise about it, because at the end of the day you want somebody to convert, then do that. Don't overdo it. I mean, if you're just gonna, if you have a rotator with 12 things on the homepage because you want to cram more content into the homepage, I think, you know, statistics show that beyond the first thing in the rotator, they're not gonna even click on it. And so you're just kind of wasting your efforts there. I don't know if that answers your question. Or anything else? Stories? Yeah.
All right. So I wonder if you have any info, since you did a lot of research around mega menus for e-commerce websites. This is a trend that is becoming more and more elevated lately, where big guys like Home Depot, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, all they're going is for a mega menu where the categorization is all encompassing that bucket. And then you get even Amazon, you get there, and then you get the whole thing, and you can like dive into even like I think it's the third level, and then you get kind of that path the product faster. Do you have any data or information or light around that?
You know, I don't know if I have a ton of data, but I do have a lot of experience with, you know, kind of running into that. You know, the whole idea of the 3 clicks kind of helps perpetuate that sometimes. I think really what's more important is to think about the paths that you're giving people and the choices that you're making available to them. If, you know, for example, if you say, okay, well, we're going to have this navigation, and then we're going to have, you know, people want to know like what the most popular products are, but you take away search. And that's like, let's say, you know, 1 in 5 people on your site, the first thing they do is search. But you say, well, we're you know, the majority of people are going to be fine, but you're still just counting 1 in 5 people, so that's kind of like doing them a disservice. If you're talking about a mega menu on a navigation, you're talking about a desktop, right? Because you can't really do that. I mean, you can, but the experience is a little bit, you know, hefty on a mobile device. So the things that we've been running into is the design happens and this mega menu, which can kind of look good, and it's like, oh, you got these options. I mean, the search is built right into the menu there, or, you know, I've got a featured product right there that I can, you know, click on. That seems nice, but then you have to gracefully degrade, and I would advocate that is going to be twice as hard to do as to progressively enhance. And so that's why, again, I think mobile first is a much better way to start, because it forces you to think about content priority. I can't have too many things in the nav because I don't have that much real estate. You know, and what happens when I have to go 2 and 3 levels deep? I mean, what are the, you know, precedents being set for that? I mean, mobile navigation is something that's still kind of finding its way, and you don't want to confuse the user, especially because, again, I have this other talk that I give about it, but it's like mobile use is exploding. It's exponentially growing, and if you're not thinking about that and you're just kind of relying on this, tried and true desktop experience, then that might work for you for a while, but you're going to be quickly sort of losing share to your competitors that are doing a better job with it. Anybody else? Any stories or thoughts? Everybody tweet? Just kidding. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you for sticking around, and I'll check out my feed here real quick so I can get these out. Okay, let's see here, is Brittany Emmert here? Oh, hey, there you are. All right. And how about is Richfield Branch? Oh. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Go. Oh, good. I get some positive comments.